Makes you feel like spring is happening.
We hope.
Yeah, we hope, yeah.
Oh, it's happening.
Yeah. Makes you feel like spring is happening.
Thank you
We
for
hope.
attending this Connect Together
Yeah, we
event.
hope, yeah.
During this event, we
Oh,
have
it's
automatic
happening.
closed captioning available.
Yeah.
Please go to the bottom of the Zoom meeting, click Live Transcript, and then Show Subtitles to turn them on. Before we begin, we'd like to take a quick moment to let you know how you can join an opinion research panel made specifically for British Columbians living with disabilities.
For 25 years, the Disability Foundation has been fostering meaningful experiences for Canadians with disabilities through outdoor recreation, social connectedness, innovative adaptive devices, and more. Today we are asking, how has the pandemic affected you? Help strengthen decision makers' understanding of your needs and experiences by joining an online opinion research panel consisting solely of people with disabilities and their caregivers. Make a difference in your community today. The Disability Foundation. Reimagine what is possible.
Did you know? Young adults with disabilities have a harder time getting hired. Break down barriers by sharing your story. Take our survey.
Yeah.
All right, Jordan, you can carry on. Thank you so much.
All right, the stage is mine. Perfect. Well, hey, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. If somebody might be able to let me know that you're able to see my screen, that would be wonderful, and that you can hear me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're able to see it. It says planting the perfect vegetable garden there. You've got that, Elizabeth?
Yes, I do.
All right. It is so good to see you.
Yeah, it's nice to see you too. It's been so long.
It's been a moment here. That's right. And Terry, great to see you as well. How are you doing? Perfect. We might have, I might have Terry, it might be muted on your end there. I didn't have the audio come through there, but I could see you talking.
Yeah. No,
There we go. How you been?
Good, good. Looking forward to spring.
That makes two of us. You know, up here where I am in Squamish, we have gotten so much snow this past season. You know, I haven't seen it like this before. And there was a stretch in there in like, I think it was mid-December. You know, we got a big tent on my driveway that we put up to be kind of like expanding our packaging area. And like on the second day of snow, which was like 3 days after we set it up, the whole thing just collapsed from the amount of snow that was on the top. So I was like, oh no. And then it felt like Groundhog Day, where it was just like, it'd be 9 p.m. I would have like, you know, taken care of all the snow, and there's no snow coming down. So I'm like, all right, I can go to sleep peacefully. And then I wake up at like 3 a.m. to go to the bathroom, and I look out the window and it's just like endless amounts of snow coming down. So I shovel the driveway. And then the next evening, like going, you know, kind of start wrapping up at 9, 10 p.m., no snow coming down, wake up, tons of snow. I'm like, when did this happen? Like, what's actually going on right now here? So
Yeah.
as it's been warmer and above freezing level the last kind of like probably 10 days or so, I don't know if I've ever been so excited just to see a patch of grass where like I can see a little bit of on my yard now. I'm like, oh, that little bit of grass there just has me hopeful for spring ahead here. I didn't know that I would see that day, but it's where I'm at.
Well, it's almost like when we see all the rain, it's like, okay, now we're getting to spring.
Yeah. What is the saying? Like May showers brings June flowers, I think is what some folks have said, which is certainly I like. Now, Debbie, I don't know if we have met or if you were on any of our sessions in the fall time.
No, I didn't do any in this. I'm just, I've always been on the computer, but let's see, I created a group in Facebook for the BC paraplegic and quadriplegics.
Okay.
Because everything I kept finding was in the States. So I decided to make my own group, and then all this stuff I just put on my website so other people could see it.
Amazing. Love that. Well, you'll have to kind of send it through or email it through to me, jordan@mindandsoil.com. I'd love to take a look, and I can share some of that through like our Instagram account as well,
Right.
because I think we have about 6,000 people on there. So
All
you
right.
never know who's in the community and who could really benefit from a group like that, and be happy
Yes,
to get
yeah.
out there in front of
Yes.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Perfect.
it is a great group that she created. I'm a member of it, and it is a great group. So
Yeah. Thank you.
Amazing.
Jennifer.
Love it. Well, Debbie, because we haven't met, Elizabeth and Terry are familiar with me, but I'm Jordan from Mind and Soil.
Okay.
And I founded Mind and Soil in December of 2020. And we're a gardening business, but we approach things a little bit differently in that we're entirely focused on helping individuals connect to the mental health benefits that come from gardening.
Right.
So just kind of like how peaceful, how calming, how soothing and restorative it is. And so with that, I love doing events like this, where we're able to spend some time together. I'm able to share a little bit of my knowledge, but a lot of the times I end up being a student as well and learning from the other individuals that are attending. So tons and tons of fun. And on top of that, I'm not sure actually, Elizabeth and Terry, if we had even really launched our YouTube channel in the fall when we had last connected, but we're putting out like 2 videos every single week right now. On something gardening related, and with a bit of an emphasis again on that more mindful side of gardening and how to be kind of tapping into the mental health benefits of gardening. So if you're ever just looking for something to watch in the evening or in the morning or anytime throughout the day, take a little peruse through the YouTube account there, and there's gonna be lots of new stuff coming out on it. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
I'll do that.
Awesome. And so we've already talked a little bit about spring here, but I'm super excited because we're kind of all focused on planning for the season ahead right now. And in a lot of ways, I actually wish that my garden looked like this right now, but unfortunately, it's still covered in snow. But what I want to be kind of going through today all together here is the plan that I use and the planning method that I use to really turn this into the garden of my dreams and that perfect garden for me. And so the important part to note on that front is that there isn't one perfect garden or anything, but rather it's going to be unique for each and every one of us, and ultimately what we're looking for from the garden this coming season. And so by following through and going through this method, this ultimately turned into looking like this last year, where it was really, really thriving. And by doing this bit of planning in January, it allowed me to ultimately have tons and tons of vegetables, produce coming out of the garden. I'm not sure if you see up here, right behind me here, but I still have a whole bunch of pickled cucumbers in there, pickles that are from the last season that I'm almost like needing to begin working through in order to, be ready to go and recovered from having so many pickles over the last year to be excited about growing cucumbers this coming season. So with that said, I'm very, very confident that by kind of following some of the steps that we're going to go through today, each and every one of you can have some really amazing bounty harvests and yields. I see Marnie just joined us there. Hey, Marnie. And one thing just before we dive into the kind of first step here that I wanted to share was just this kind of quote that we got from an individual in our community that really, I think, illustrates everything that we're looking to accomplish with Mind and Soil. So after attending several happy hours or workshops like this, I turned my bare patch of compacted soil and construction fill into a beautiful and productive vegetable and flower garden. My boys got to help me all the way from starting seeds inside in February to caring for them all summer long. We snacked on carrots and tomatoes still warm from the sun. We carried huge bowls of lettuce, thanks to all the neighbors to share. And we watched our big fat pumpkins turn orange in time for Halloween. My daily routine of watering, tending tomato vines, and checking on my veggie babies became a self-care ritual for me, and something that I've missed deeply since September. And so that's the piece that, again, even above and beyond those vegetables, I really want to help bring that peacefulness and that joy that the garden has to each and every one of you. So any questions over the course of this session or over the course of the year, please, please, please do send those through to me. But let's go ahead and let's start diving in with the first of 5 steps that we're going to go through for planning out the perfect vegetable garden. And that first one is really all around dreaming about the season ahead and kind of just spending a couple moments, again, like, there's a lot of snow out there right now. It's still really cold. There's not too much that we necessarily need to be doing in the garden. And so it's a great time to just kind of be slowing down and dreaming about the season ahead. And there's two areas that I really encourage you to spend a little bit of time just kind of thinking about. And the first one is, what's my goal for the upcoming season? So when you think about your garden this coming year, what the goal is that you're hoping that that garden brings for you. And by all means, like, jump in and let me know if you'd like to share. But I'll share, what kind of like my goals are for this upcoming season with my garden. So the first goal that I have is all around restoration. So the garden is where I go to kind of restore myself, recharge my batteries, and really just be at peace. So anything on the bounty, harvest, yield side, that really comes secondary to making sure that I'm enjoying my time in the garden. I actually really don't like the energy of feeling like this plant has to grow however big or however large or yield however much. I like for that all to be a byproduct of just spending that time in the garden. And so the second goal that I have, it is on the kind of like the harvest side. And this is going to be a pretty fun goal that I'm really excited to be working on this coming year. And I'm going to be sharing a lot of it on our YouTube account. And so my goal for this upcoming season is that I want to eat from my garden every day of the year. And I have some ideas on how this is going to go, and I'm going to put a bit of a plan in place, but there is going to be a lot of unknown, I think, all through the season, in terms of, what am I going to do if we have a heat dome? What am I going to do if we have a really big cold snap? What am I going to do when I go on vacation and I am not near my garden, but I need to still be finding a way to be eating from it? How am I going to be preserving things and bringing them with me? So I think that this is going to be a really fun challenge for me to continue to kind of grow and expand as a gardener. So wanted to pause for just a second to see if there's any questions, or if anybody wants to share any of kind of like what their goals or dreams might be for the season ahead.
Well, I've never done a vegetable garden yet, so that's what I was kind of hoping to learn a little bit more, because mine's like Butch Art Gardens. It was all flowers. So I thought, gee, I could put some vegetables in between probably. Like I really like garlic, and I've never tried that, but I use a lot.
Garlic is probably one of my most fun crops to be growing. It's so cool and so fun. And if you take a look on our YouTube account, we've already got a whole bunch of videos on exactly how to be growing garlic. And those are pretty fun ones to go through. They're some of like the ones that individuals in our community love the most there.
Now, do I go through your website to get to the videos?
If you just go to youtube.com,
yeah,
and then you search Mind and Soil, name, and garlic, then they should come up straight away.
Okay.
And Debbie, that actually is a perfect kind of segue into the second point here, is that when we think about vegetable gardens, ultimately we should be growing the vegetables and the herbs that we love to be eating. So the biggest encouragement that I have to each and every one is that when we think about that garden space that we have, is to first focus on the vegetables that we love to eat. Otherwise, we might end up overcrowding it and packing it with all the seeds that we see at the store and we get super excited about. And then it's like, I don't even know why I'm growing like mustard greens when I've never even bought these at the grocery store before. So on that front, I really encourage you, again, in this kind of like dreaming and planning phase, to first get started from the position of, what are the vegetables that I love to eat? And now one thing, I'm going to share mine in just a second here. But one thing on this front is that I'm going to send through to you all a 3-page guide that we have that's going to walk through everything that we're covering off on today. So don't feel at any point that you need to jot every note down or anything along those lines, because I'm going to send this through to you and you're going to have everything that you need to be planning your garden over the course of today, this weekend, the weeks ahead here.
Oh,
so
good.
For myself, the vegetables that I love to grow, I absolutely love kale. Elizabeth, I know that you're in on that one as well. I also really, really love basil. I love tomatoes. Put those two together on a sandwich and a pasta, and I am a happy camper. And then I also really love zucchinis. So there are more that I, will have in my garden, but for today, I really want to focus in on just these 4 vegetables to kind of understand this garden planning methodology. So those are the 4 vegetables that I've spent a couple minutes kind of thinking about and that I know I love to have in dishes and very frequently buy when I'm at the market, the grocery store. Perfect. So step 1 is all wrapped up. We're going to dive into step numero 2 now. And that is to be drawing out our space. So what we want to be doing is basically taking that backyard that we have and getting it onto paper or onto a computer so that we can start to put those vegetables that we love to eat into our garden with the right amount of space. So all that I would be doing, and this is going to be in the guide as well, is that there's some graph paper in there, is I'm just going to trace that into the garden there. So what we can see here is that I like to divide it into 1 foot squares. And the beauty of this is that I put graph paper directly into this guide, and you can operate off of the assumption that each line represents 1 foot. So when we look at this bed here, and I'm just going to pull the kind of camera, there we go. We can see that I've got 1 line across, which would be 1 foot, 2 foot across, 3 feet across, 4 foot across. And then going up this way, 1 foot, 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I immediately know that this is a 4 foot by 8 foot raised bed. And then the next one right beside it, that is also a 4 foot by 8 foot raised bed. So when we go back a picture, we've got, and let me just go back here. There we go. We've got raised bed 1, raised bed 2, raised bed 3, raised bed 4. And now in my drawing, we've got raised bed 1, raised bed 2, raised bed 3, raised bed 4. So the last piece that I would recommend doing on this front is to add a sun icon, kind of to the best of your ability based on where you're gardening and what you know about your space at this point. This was a huge learning curve for me at my house here because I was like, I got raised beds, they all get great sun. That was not the case. This bed, as you can see, I gave it a full sun icon, but the bed right next door, it gets full sun at the back, but only partial sun at the front. I wonder what could be going on there. Well, if we were to look at my backyard from this angle, what we would see over here in this area right here is my house. And the sun, it travels from here across the yard. So the house ends up creating a big shade sail across these beds. And so that's really good information and knowledge to have, because some of the vegetables that I love that might require more sun, I want to make sure that they're getting into this bed here, or maybe the back of these beds, but not up towards the front here. Let's save that for our vegetables that don't require quite as much sun. And so coming back to the garlic piece, when I moved up here, and I love growing garlic, but I didn't pay any attention to the sun because I was busy moving in, and I planted all of my garlic in this bed right here, which you might as well plant it in a shed at that point with how little sun it was getting. But the beauty of that lesson was twofold. One, I still got garlic. So even though it loves full sun, it's still going to grow in a less sun environment. So when we think about our spaces, that's why I always encourage you to first focus on the vegetables that you love, and then just understand that, hey, if you don't get absolutely amazing sun, I would encourage you to still grow the vegetables that you love, but just understand they might grow a little bit smaller than if they were in those pristine environments. I still think that's a better outcome than growing something that you don't love, that you're not going to be excited about seeing it do well, just because it's more ideal from a sun perspective. So with that garlic, it still grew. And the second piece, the second kind of takeaway there was that I learned that this is not where to be growing garlic next season. And so the next season, this past year, I put it at the very back of this bed here. And the size of those garlic heads were just absolutely, absolutely astonishing and incredible. So it was an incredible learning on both fronts. One, that it will grow in a low sun environment. And two, I found out where the big sun environments are in my yard. So put those sun icons on there just to kind of be a little bit of a guide and help you kind of prioritize where you're going to be placing things throughout your garden. Now, I'm not sure if any of the gardens for you are in patios or have kind of physical structures around them that could block the sun. But if that is the case, all that you would want to be doing is draw the outline of your space first, or of that patio first, and then black out any areas that would not be kind of able to move, such as say like a barbecue or a outdoor table or a big umbrella. Those are areas that we're not going to be able to use. And then the remaining open boxes in that patio kind of parameter that we've drawn, that becomes the gardening space that we can utilize and ultimately be putting containers, grow bags into, etc. So that's the kind of only piece I just wanted to quickly touch on for kind of patio gardens or anywhere where there's like some larger structures around the garden. Which brings us into step numero 3. So our third step for planning out our perfect garden is to now add our vegetables, right? So when we think about this, we've now identified in step 1 that these are the vegetables that I love to grow, and this is my gardening space. So how do I go about getting the vegetables that I love now into that garden space so that they are in the right sun position, but also so they have the right amount of space? And what I'm going to do here is that after step number 3, I'm going to pause for a moment just to see if there's any questions that have come through. But step number 3 here is probably the one, it can feel a little bit complex at the very beginning. So just kind of like hang with me for the next 2 to 3 minutes. And what I kind of bet will happen is that as soon as we've gone through the first and second vegetable, it will feel really, really comfortable. And again, everything that we're about to go through is going to be in this guide that I'm going to send through to each and every one of you. So how do we go about getting the vegetables that we love into our garden space? Well, let's go back to that list of the vegetables that I love, and let's grab kale. Now, I might kind of probably start thinking through like, how much sun does kale need? How much space does kale need? And so on the second page of the guide, I have a space planner, and it goes through every vegetable that you'd likely be growing, how much sun they need and how much space they need. And so all that you would then do is you'd see it, it's a little bit overwhelming at first, and you'd zoom in on kale. And so we see it right here. Perfect. Okay, I can now see how much sun does kale like and prefer? Partial sun. Perfect. Good little piece of information. Now, how many of those little squares does it require? Only 1 square. And how many kale plants can I fit into that 1 square? Only 1. So now I go back to my drawing and I add in kale. So what we can see here is 1 line across, 1 line up. That creates a little square, and we put in kale plant number 1. And then right beside that, we do kale plant 2, kale plant 3, kale plant 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, if we were really loving kale and wanting to have a significant amount of it in our garden. And that is going to yield a ton and a ton of kale leaves to be enjoying in salads all through the summer and definitely well into the fall. So just like that, we have got kale in there. Let's move on to our next vegetable. So what was the vegetable that we loved? Basil. What do? We go over to our space planner and we look up basil. Okay. How much sun does basil require? Full sun. How many squares are required for basil? Only 1 square. But now, how many basil plants can we be fitting into that square? 4. So how come we could only fit 1 kale plant into a square, but now we can fit 4 basil plants in a square? The reason behind that is because basil is a much smaller plant than kale. So we can plant it more densely and it will still have enough space for it to absolutely be thriving. Okay, we've got that information. So we take that and we go back to our drawing and we add in basil. So what we can see here is the next square, basil 1, basil 2, basil 3, and basil 4. But that's not 4 basil plants because remember how many are in each square? 4. So this is actually going to be 4 basil plants, 8 basil plants, 12 basil plants, 16 basil plants. So this square foot gardening method is really, really amazing because it allows us to make sure that 1, we're kind of spacing things out the right way, but 2, also kind of going on the more dense side and really making sure that each square foot in our garden is really performing for us. So we're going to do 2 more vegetables, the other 2 that we had, and then I'm going to pause for just a moment to answer any questions before we dive into number 4 and number 5 here. So let's get into that third one, and that is tomatoes, obviously a very popular one. And so what do we do with our tomatoes? We go over to our space planner, and now we have gone from the small plant side over to our larger plants. And so I go down, I look up tomato, it loves full sun. And how many squares are required for a tomato plant? 2. So it's not just 1 square that we need to be dedicating for a plant now, it's 2 squares that we need to be dedicating for that tomato plant. And how many tomato plants can we be fitting into that square? Only 1. Perfect. We go back to our drawing and we add in tomatoes. And what you can see that I did here is I added a little bit of a dotted line in there to carve out a 2 square box. So we can see 1 line up, 2 across, and that equals 2 square feet there. And I've put my first tomato plant in right there, tomato plant 1. Now in the next set of 2 square feet, I put tomato plant 2 and then tomato plant 3. And the last thing that you might want to note here is that, as you can see, I've staggered them. So I didn't just create 1 line here and then another line here, but rather I staggered them and zigzagged them back and forth. And this is going to accomplish 2 things for you. The first one is that rather than them growing right beside each other, where one could grow a little bit taller and become a shade canopy over the other one and limit it, it's now beside each other. So they're not going to be kind of creating shade canopies on top of each other. And the second piece is that by having them staggered like that, that's going to create some really nice channels for airflow to be moving throughout it, which is going to decrease the likelihood of diseases setting in on the plants in a really hot, humid environment that we get into come July and into August there. So that is the reason for staggering some of those larger plants within the 2 squares that we've put aside for them. And so the last vegetable that we want to be getting into our garden here is the big boys, zucchinis. And these ones, when you put it into the ground, you'll be like, oh, it's teeny tiny, but you wait 3-4 weeks and that thing is going to be exploding. So zucchinis, how much sun do they like and how much sun do they require? Full sun. And how many squares are required for a zucchini plant? That's 4 squares. And how many zucchini plants are going to fit into that one really large set of 4 squares? Only 1 zucchini plant. So we take that information, we head back over to our drawing. And as you can see, I did that dotted line right down the middle. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 squares there. Perfect for zucchini. I pop a Z in there and I know that that area in my garden is going to be for a zucchini plant and I'm going to be able to fit 2 of them in there. So if you're still with me, you have made it through the most challenging part of the session here today, which is good. Step 4, step 5, those are easy ones. But I wanted to pause for just a moment here to see if there are any questions on the dreaming, the goal setting, the drawing out of the garden, or adding your vegetables into the garden.
We have moles. Am I going to have a problem with moles with the vegetables?
That's a good question. I haven't heard of moles going after a specific one crop. Okay. So, from that perspective, there isn't something that like you definitely shouldn't plant this because they 100% will go after it. Have they been disturbing your gardens in the past years, like in the flowers that you've been growing?
Well, they don't go after the flowers, but they go tunneling.
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden my tree might be leaning over and then I see where the tunnel went underneath. Yeah.
Yeah. So keep an eye on it for sure. Okay. And then, it might end up being that, you need to put some form of like a physical barrier in place there. And that could be like a piece of wood beneath it with some really small holes in it. And then some, walls going around it. Right. That's what, same thing with individuals that have deer. At that instance, you need to be putting more of like a fence around the garden so that the deer can't be getting in there. So
okay, we got those too.
What's that?
We've got deers too. We got everything up here.
Whereabouts are you?
I'm in Port Moody, but way up in the mountain.
Yeah. Awesome. So, what we want to be thinking through from more of just like a pest management perspective is first, what is the pest? And then second, what is it disturbing? Okay. And then third, how is it causing that disturbance? So is it burrowing through? Is it jumping over something? Is it going straight in? And then the fourth piece is how do we create a physical barrier that would prevent them from being able to do that? So that's why, again, with individuals that have deer, you'll see them put a fence around the garden space so that the deer can't get in there. That's creating a physical barrier. But when we zoom in on an even kind of smaller scale than that, one thing that happens to, say, kale plants is that cabbage moths, those little white moths, they come and they land on the plant and they leave a little egg that turns into a cabbage worm, a little green worm, and it will leave little holes in the leaves. And some people, they really don't enjoy this. And so once again, in that instance, we need to be thinking through, how do we create a physical barrier between that kale plant and the cabbage moth? And that's where something like row cover can go over top of it and block those cabbage moths from being able to get in there. So it's all, again, just kind of a lot of it really comes down to understanding what is the insect, the pest, the critter that's causing a disturbance, and how do we make that kind of more challenging them for them to get to the things that we are trying to protect. Yeah. Super good question. Lots
of slugs too.
Yeah, I've got a whole bunch of those up here with slugs. Like, you know, you definitely can go down kind of like the beer trap route. I've done that and that works quite well. But also what I'll do with slugs is, like, any of the like leaves that have maybe yellowed a little bit or that I'm not going to be eating, I just kind of like leave those on, or I pop them and just leave them on the garden bed, because I'm like, they're going to be eating. I might as well make it easy for them to eat things that I don't want to eat. So I put them down there in hopes of distracting them from like the really good stuff a little bit higher.
Right. Yeah.
And that's worked fairly well.
Yeah.
Perfect. Any other questions before we dive on to step number 4?
Well, when they were talking about moles, in our raised bed last year, we had the moles, and I was giving ground cherry seeds because I'm in a competition called Shed Wars. Anyway, I was giving them, and the moles ate the plants.
Oh,
so
no.
The moles were coming and eating the ground cherries, and we didn't get hardly any. And so one of my friends came and they found a really big rock, and they put it in the tunnels, and it stopped them. But Debbie, that's one of my, like, I'm currently working with digging now, and that's one of my jobs is to schedule workshops for the first weeks of the months. And, you know, I'll see if we can get someone like on that to do, you know, to do protection, you know, for pests and stuff like that. Like,
right.
That's one of my jobs. So,
right.
You know.
Yeah, it's a good idea with the moles, is because I know he comes through one area and then everything kind of sinks down. I'm going to put like a piece of sheet of metal right in there to stop him from going through there now.
Yeah.
I'm going to try it anyways.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? Whether it's a sheet of metal or a rock there like Elizabeth, those are both forms of physical barriers, right? Where we're not, you know, damaging, hurting that critter by any stretch, but just kind of like putting something, again, a physical barrier in place to prevent them from getting to the thing that we're looking to protect.
Yeah,
that's right.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, well, let's dive into the 4th step here. So again, just kind of recap, we've got the vegetables that we love to eat, and we've got our garden space, and we've now placed those vegetables into the garden. The next part that we need to kind of start thinking through and figuring out is, how many seeds should I be starting to fill that garden up the way that I want it to be? And we can actually do this by just kind of working backwards. And it might mean that we don't actually need to start any seeds if we didn't want to be. So in order to determine this, what we do is we go back to the vegetables that we love, and we first grab the one, kale. And what I want to be doing, and again, this is in the guide here, it's on the kind of final page of it, this little math sheet that I have for you. And what we do is we look up, how many squares did I draw out for kale? So I go back to my drawing and I can see kale 1, kale square 2, kale square 3, kale square 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Perfect. So I add that in. Now, again, how many kale plants are in each of those squares? If I needed to remind myself, I would go back to my space planner and I look up plants per square for kale. That is 1. I add that in, 1. So now 8 multiplied by 1 means that I will have 8 kale plants in the garden. I continue along to the next one, which was basil. How many basil squares did I draw? Basil square 1, basil square 2, 3, and 4. Perfect. I add that in. Now, how many basil plants were there in each of those squares that we drew? Over to the space planner. I can see Debbie's already got it there. I saw her mouthing it.
Only math of
She's like whispering it, so I couldn't quite hear. That's good. She's following along real closely. And it is 4. So we got 4 basil plants in each of there. So now we add that in. So now 4 multiplied by 4 equals 16 basil plants. Same thing for tomatoes. We add it up, square 1, tomato square 2, tomato square 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now we add that in. Number of squares drawn for tomatoes is 6. And how many tomato plants in each one of those squares? Only 1. So now we add that in. 6 multiplied by 1 means that we would have 6 tomato plants in that garden. The last one were our zucchinis. 1 zucchini square, 2 zucchini square. And so now we look up how many of those zucchinis can we fit into that really large square. We know that that is 1 as well. 2 multiplied by 1 equals 2 zucchinis. It's pretty remarkable, hey, like one, how quickly we can put a plan in place for how to really be ensuring that the vegetables that we love to eat are in our garden. But then on top of that, kind of how much we can grow in a fairly small space. You know, we don't need to have endless amounts of raised beds or anything like that to have a really incredible garden. We can do that with just one bed like this, even just a patio, something along those lines, by using this method of square foot gardening and ensuring that each of the feet in that garden is maximized. So now, if you didn't want to be starting seeds or starting from seeds, you have now like your kind of like your shopping list of exactly how many seedlings you would want to be grabbing from the store. So you'd go to the nursery and you'd grab your 8 kale plants, you'd grab 16 basil plants, 6 tomatoes, and 2 zucchinis. You bring those to your garden in kind of May, in and around then, and you are off to the races, getting those transplanted into the garden and really thriving for the season ahead. But what if you want to be starting those from seed? Well, in that instance, do we start only 1 zucchini seed for the 1 plant that we want? Well, we don't want to do that because sometimes there's going to be a seed that just like we could do everything perfectly, but it's not going to germinate. So my rule of thumb is to start 5 seeds for every desired plant that we want. So if we wanted to have 1 zucchini plant in the garden, we would start 5 zucchini seeds, and that's going to ensure that one of them is going to germinate. But what's more likely to happen is that 2 or 3 of those will germinate, begin growing, and then you get kind of your choice as to which one do you want to have going into your garden. You're kind of a pick of the litter of the zucchini babies to ultimately end up putting into your garden. So all that we do with that information is we now in here, we add seeds, 5 for each of them, and then we just multiply 8 kale plants by 5 seeds, means that I would want to start 40 kale seeds. If I wanted 16 basil plants multiplied by 5 seeds, I would start 80 basil seeds. And that might sound like a lot of seeds, but if you kind of grab even the smallest, and I'm gonna grab one here because I have it right here. And so this teeny tiny pack of seeds from West Coast Seeds, this is for basil. If 80 sounds like a lot, this pack here, it has 250 basil seeds in it. So it just goes to show kind of how many you get in an instance like that. And it could be or look like a bit of a big number, but in reality, it really ends up being quite a breeze. And we continue along to tomato. If we wanted 6 tomato plants multiplied by 5, that would be starting 30 tomato seeds. And lastly, 10 zucchini seeds. So now in January, we have the vegetables that we love, and we know exactly how many seeds we need to be having for each and every one of them to be growing the number of plants that we want to have in our garden. So the last thing that we need to kind of figure out is just when would I be starting those seeds? And that's the 5th and final step for planning our garden for the upcoming season, is just quickly understanding when do we want to be starting those seeds. And so to determine this, all that we need to do is search the city name that you're living in and growing zone. So I'm up here in Squamish. I would look up Squamish growing zone. And what that's going to pull back is a result like this that's going to say 7B in my instance. For each of you, it might be 7B, it might be 8A, it might be 8B. The kind of warmer the environment, the higher this growing zone ends up being. So our friends over in kind of Calgary and Edmonton, they'd be in like zone 4, zone 3, even lower where it's not as warm as it is here on the coast. And now that you know your growing zone, the last thing that you do is you type in the words growing zone, and then the actual growing zone, 7B, and the words planting chart. So let's take a look here at the Google result, growing zone 7B planting chart. And that's going to pull back a bunch of results that are going to tell you for each and every seed when you would go about starting it for it to be set up for success and to thrive this upcoming season. And my good friends over at West Coast Seeds, they've put together these really, really amazing vegetable planting charts where it essentially goes through every vegetable that you be growing and when you want to start it, depending on the zone that you're in. So right now, I think we'd all be using the same one, which is coastal BC. And what we can see is, say for like an artichoke, if that was something that you were looking to grow, you could be starting those in January because they need a lot of time indoors before moving them outdoors. And then say something like broccoli, that would be a little bit further along, such as in March. So what you will be doing is that you then kind of just go through that, looking for the vegetables that you put down that you love to eat, and then just jotting down the month that you would be starting them in. So for myself, I know from that planting chart that I can start my kale in March, I can start my basil in March, I can start my tomatoes in March, and that zucchini, again, it's going to take off so quickly that I do not want to be starting that thing before mid-April because it is going to be taking over my whole seed starting area before I know it. And so folks, that's everything that I wanted to cover off on here today, is that with those 5 steps there, from, you know, kind of spending a little bit of time dreaming about the season ahead and then placing the vegetables that we love into our garden, you're going to end up with something really, really remarkable this coming season, where I really am confident that you're going to have big and beautiful bounties, harvests, and yields coming out of the garden and the space that each and every one of you are working with. So would love to kind of open it up for any questions that anybody might have here, and just kind of help out any additional way that I can before we wrap up here. So any questions, fire them through towards me here.
Just a comment, Jordan, I've tried this method and
Yeah.
it's great. It really is a great way to get
Woo!
maximum yield. And you just Google up online, there's so much written about square foot gardening.
Yeah,
So-
totally. And, you know, on that front, you know, what you'll potentially see with the space planner that I've put together is that, you know, some of those vegetables, I give them a little bit more space than other individuals, other guides, and the more like formal square foot gardening book. So there is not a, you know, like exact science to this plant needs exactly this amount of space. This is where I think a big part of it comes into, like, again, what brings you joy, what brings you happiness, and factoring that into how much space and how many of each of the plants you grow, because ultimately that's what it all really boils down to.
What about planting seeds like right into the garden as opposed to first?
Yeah, as opposed to starting indoors.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So the, you know, kind of 2 schools of thought are either start seeds indoors or direct sow them. And so there are some vegetables that you can definitely direct sow, and then there's other ones that you probably wouldn't want to direct sow, maybe like a pepper plant or even a tomato plant. And the reason why you wouldn't direct sow those ones is because for them to germinate, it needs to be about 70 Fahrenheit, 21, 22 Celsius. And so if the soil temperature is not that warm, then they're not going to germinate. And so when we think about a pepper plant or a tomato plant, we wouldn't do those as direct sowing because, you know, it's going to be in June, July that the soil temperatures get to that warmth. And by the time that they germinate, we're then into August. We wouldn't be getting any tomatoes off of them before the season comes to a close. So by doing them indoors, you're then able to start them in March. And then by the time that we get to kind of like early May, when we be transplanting things into the garden, they're really nice, really strong plants. So that's kind of the reason why we would start some of them indoors. Now, the reason why we'd start some outdoors, I would say a big part of it is just from like a space perspective, right? If we only have so much space inside to be starting our plants, then let's start the ones that need that really warm environment to be growing, and let's direct sow our other ones. So that would be the kind of rationale on that front there. But you can definitely do both of them.
Thank you.
Great question. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, you know, I guess one third piece on that front is that you know, plants are kind of like they're most susceptible in those first few weeks. So I've got a lot of friends who have direct sown stuff, and then, you know, little rabbits and critters, they'll come and have a really tasty salad for lunch, and eat up those very early on seedlings. And so when I start things indoors, I don't transplant them until they have about 6 leaves on the plant. That's kind of like the benchmark that I go for in terms of maturity. And that's a much more daunting plant to come up to for some little critter. So I haven't at any point lost any vegetables that I have transplanted into the garden, just because they are a little bit more mature at that point in time. But then come springtime, so when we're in like midsummer, that's when I'll do a little bit more direct sowing, because again, we got those warmer temperatures. It's easier to direct sow at that point. So I would do it more so at that time for myself and my personal preferences. Debbie.
Just raised beds. Do you have any idea? Like, I know you can order them to be put together. Do you have any place that you like or have or know about?
Yeah, so there's the company that I guess I have heard really good things about, and they're based out of North Vancouver, is called LifeSpace Gardens. And so they are like raised bed garden boxes, and they come with a watering system built in. So it is a below ground watering. So there's basically like a liner or a bladder built into the raised bed. And it's really beautiful, because then if you're not there, say during the heat dome every single day, the garden, it still has water, and then you just refill that bladder, and it feeds into the soil from the bottom and kind of gets wicked up into the soil. So that would be an option that you could go with. And then yeah, the other option would be something more like kind of like your birdies beds, and like the steel ones that come as the sheets of metal and then would need to be assembled. So a couple options on that front.
Oh, thank you.
I think, Debbie, too, the Tetra Foundation, if you contact them, like, I think they build, like, they provide accessible stuff, so they might even do raised beds.
Right. I thought of that too, but then I just thought, oh, maybe he knows of somebody, right?
Yeah.
Elizabeth, what was the name of that group?
The Tetra, I'll send it to you.
Oh yeah, please do.
Yeah, the Tetra group, like they do. I know they raised the beds for all, or they built the beds for all our gardens, I know.
Right.
Yeah, would love to have you pass along their information to me. I'd love to take a look.
Yeah, she just posted it in chat too, Marna.
Marnie did.
Yeah, they're a great organization.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Jordan, what was the name of those the planter boxes with the bladder?
Yeah, it's called LifeSpace Gardens. Yeah. And then on the watering front, right? So those ones come with like the bladder built directly in. But one thing that I used last year is called a GrowABLE, GrowABLE. And this is like, it's like a terracotta pot that you put into your garden that holds, say, like a gallon or 2 gallons of water. And it does the same thing. So the water wicks out from it into the soil and kind of gets pulled out. And then you just refill that one terracotta pot. And so that I found it's incredibly efficient from a water usage perspective. And again, ensures that plants always have water when they need it. So those ones are really nice, because you just buy the terracotta pot and then you put it into your garden, opposed to needing to buy like the whole raised bed and setup. So kind of an option for both.
Oh, I like that idea, the terracotta. Then you can put it in between your flowers, and then
Yeah, exactly.
And there are some amazing watering devices now. You can trigger them with your phone,
right?
Timer to water.
Yeah. So what I have in my backyard is like it's just off of the water line, and it uses like a 4-way splitter. So I've got 4 different watering zones through my garden. which is great, but it just uses so much water, which I'm not wild about. And so what I am going to experiment around with this year, very big emphasis on experiment because I've got no idea whether or not it will work, is that I do have rain barrels and I do have some catchments already set up on my gutters. And so what I want to do is set a rain barrel up, but then have those growiyas in the garden spaced around my plants, and then run irrigation tubing from the rain barrel to those terracotta pots so that they fill up until they're full. And then I shut the water off because then it's going to fill all them up. They'll be able to water their plants. The rain barrel will hopefully fill back up. And then as I need to kind of refill those, I'm sure I'll figure out kind of what the cadence is for that. And then I can set that as its own zone. So makes sense up here, but I can't wait to see what hurdles and roadblocks I run into.
I have one other question, actually. So I try to grow mostly from like pots or containers.
Yep.
So last year I didn't have a lot of success with tomatoes. I think it might have just been too small of a pot. So do tomatoes generally need like a lot of soil and really, I mean, you said two, right?
Tomatoes grow really well in pots.
Yeah.
So yeah, you'll be good on that front. And then I like to go with what I've gone with is like a 5-gallon grow bag. That being probably the smallest that you would want to go for a tomato. So if you were to then look at, like, say my friends over at West Coast Seeds, where like they've got fields and fields of space, they still grow all their tomatoes in containers, and they do that out of like a 30-gallon bucket or pail or grow bag. So larger than the 5-gallon one, but they end up, yeah, they do really well in grow bags, containers. Once you've kind of figured out the formula.
But they need sun too. They need sun though too, right? The tomatoes like the sun.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely. They love sun. They're big eaters. So you'd want to be feeding the soil that they're in with some really good amendments. And then like if they're getting good sun and they're well fed and well watered, then you're in a good position for them to really thrive. Amazing. Any other questions before we wrap up here?
Good.
It's so nice connecting with you all to kick off the year here. I'm so excited for us doing these kind of on a monthly basis here, leading into the season.
Well, if you join up my group, then you can post any of these things in my group there.
I would love to. I would love to. If you, again, if you could email that through to me.
Right.
It's just Jordan, Jordan.
Can you put it in your chat thing there?
Yeah, let me drop it into the chat function here. Where is my chat?
It would be great to do one of these on starting the seeds.
That's what we got coming up next.
All right.
I got you covered. Don't worry.
All right.
Oh, don't you worry. I got you covered. How many of you are planning to start seeds indoors? What's everybody feeling like?
I don't have any room.
No room for Debbie. Terry, will you be starting seeds?
I'd love to. I haven't had much success in the past. So.
We're changing that this year. I can tell you that right now.
All right.
Elizabeth, how about yourself?
I'll try and do some, but we don't have much room. And normally we have a balcony garden this year, but they're doing work on our balcony, so I'm not even going to have a balcony garden. But that's one thing that's going to be coming out within the next month or so. That Diga is doing a home garden project. So again, it will be for the members, but they're going to be planters and they're going to be self-watered, and they'll be able to go on people's balconies and stuff like that. I can't get one because we don't have the balcony, but I'll be sending out the email probably within the next couple of weeks about that.
And Diga's got representation in a lot of community gardens around Vancouver.
Yeah.
And so.
Awesome.
Jordan, on your email, should it be AND?
Oh, good catch.
I just thought, what did that mean when I saw it? Okay.
Great catch. There we go. Thank you for that.
Okay.
And Marnie, how about yourself? Are you thinking of starting some seeds indoors? Yeah.
For sure.
Amazing. So take a peek at this. This was a picture that we got actually just 2 days ago from an individual in our community. And this is them using our worm casting seedling mix. So the seedling mix that we create that individuals buy from us compared to just the store-bought mix that you'd find on the shelves at a lot of stores. So it's working really, really, really well. And the reason behind that is because of the worm castings that we put into our seedling mix, as well as the compost. And the team over at West Coast Seeds, they're like professionally trained horticulturalists. They've been trialing it as well. And so take a look at this one here. This was them starting Swiss chard the exact same day as another round of Swiss chard in, again, just like a high quality store-bought mix. This was the kind of like their most premium seed starting mix. And you can see how much bigger, more lush they're growing here.
Nice.
And so
Do you sell these things too?
what's that?
Do you sell these things?
So we do, but I would love to set each and every one of you up with our seedling mix complimentary. So
Oh, neat.
I'll work with Elizabeth on exactly how we go about doing that. Because I would absolutely love, to be supporting each and every one of you through the season, but getting this seedling mix into your hands so that you can be starting those babies.
Right.
And are you like KFC? You won't tell your formula? I do. I'm a worm rancher, so I want to know.
I'm torn on this one because I don't know because I like
keep your secret.
That's right.
It's tricky though, because like I love the accessibility side, and like if I can be helping people get their hands dirty gardening and feel how good it is, like for me that trumps the recipe a zillion times over. Yeah. Conversely, on the other side, like it's been 3 years of working, tinkering, playing around. If you were, I got to show you this right now. Like if you were looking at my apartment here, or not my apartment, my house just downstairs, I've got seeds running in an experiment right there. I've got seeds in an experiment right there.
Nice.
4 seeds in the grow zone over there. And I've got 2 other experiments going on, and I've been playing around with different mixes, combinations for 3 years now. So I do think that there's like some intellectual property in there.
Oh yeah.
I'm just like, I just want people to be growing and feeling how good gardening is. So we'll see.
Got to join off camera one day.
Share these pictures around and people will be buying it like crazy.
That's right.
That's right. That's great.
That's good.
Perfect.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
That's everything here for today. My email is in the chat there, and the other piece is that between now and our next little workshop like this, I answer every single question, comment that we get on our YouTube account. So if you watch any of our videos, or if you just have a question at any point, just drop it onto like literally any one of the videos. And the way that I start every one of my days is I have my coffee on the couch and I answer every single comment, question, message that we receive. So you'll hear back from me really, really quickly on that. And then we'll reconvene about a month from now for our next workshop. And that's all going to be around how to go about starting seeds. And as mentioned, I'm going to get in touch with Elizabeth between now and then to help set you all up with some seed starting mix for this upcoming season. How's that sound?
Yeah. Do you have a Facebook page for Mind and Soil?
Sorry, what was that?
Do you have a Facebook page for Mind and Soil?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, Facebook. Yeah. Just Mind and Soil there as well. And then Instagram at Mind and Soil. And then YouTube is just youtube.com/Mind and Soil.
Okay. I haven't gotten into Instagram or anything like that yet. Too much.
Well, I have to tell you, Jordan, my mental health is much better now. So
love to hear that, Terry. Love it. Thank you for sharing that.
It's a great session. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm so excited to just be getting to spend these Fridays with you all over the course of the upcoming season here. I think that we're gonna have a whole lot of fun.
Right.
We are.
No, I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Alrighty, folks, I'm going to sign off here, but thank you all so much for the time here. Look at that, 3 on the nose. I didn't even look at the clock.
Oh, yes, it is.
So,
Well,
Alrighty.
hopefully more people next time.
You all
Okay,
have a great
bye.
weekend.
You all.
See you soon.